Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money. With your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 504 of Screw the Commute podcast. I'm here with an old buddy of mine, Mark Joyner. And I got to tell you, my favorite thing about this guy is that he is the only person on this earth who can send me a broadcast email, and he's so good at writing the subject lines, I think it's personal. And I open it up and I say, oh man, he got me again. He's really brilliant. And they call him the father of digital marketing because he was in it way at the beginning. And that must make me the mother of something because I was in it around 93, 94. I get called mother a lot, but I'm not sure they're referring to digital marketing. but he knows some of the people I know. I mean, my first teacher was Corey Rudel. And we all knew what was going on those days, but he was the beginning, and I'll tell you more about him later. Hope you didn't miss episode 503. That was Dan Janal. He's a guy not quite as prolific as Mark in writing a book in a day, but he's a editorial development editor. Or a development, so I don't know. I never heard the term until he told me. But anyway, it's a kind of editor that helps you get your book going pretty fast. And Mark's got books in one day. I got a book in 4 hours that's brought in $3.65 million as of this morning. So wow. We are all about speed around here. Get it done before the world changes on you. All right, how'd you like me to send you big checks? Well, if you're in my referral program, just I can send you checks, oh man, anywhere from $8.50 that you can blow at Starbucks to in excess of $5,000 for a speaking engagement, which kind of reminds me, I was at one of Mark's speaking engagements 200-300 years ago in Los Angeles. I remember that vividly. He's been a big guy in my life the whole time. And anyway, email me at tom@screwthecommute.com if you'd like to know about the referral stuff. Now, make sure you grab a copy of our podcast automation book and our business automation book. We actually figured it out a couple years ago that it saved me 7.5 million keystrokes. Just the simple, that was just one of the tips in this book. We sell it for $27, but it's yours free for listening to the show. And you can ethically steal customers from people because you're lightning fast at getting back to people. So grab a copy of that at screwthecommute.com/automate free, screwthecommute.com/automate free. It's helped me handle up to 150,000 subscribers and 65,000 customers without pulling my hair out. So grab a copy of that. And while you're at it, grab a copy of our podcast app at screwthecommute.com/app. That's APP. So you can put us on your cell phone and tablet and take us with you on the road. Now, I usually tell you about my school now, but I want to delay that and talk about this legacy program and this pilot program I have to help with persons with disabilities. I've always thought that my training in my school, which is the only licensed dedicated internet marketing school in the country, probably the world, is perfect for persons with disabilities because not only can they legitimately learn from home, they can legitimately be hired from home. And if there's one silver lining in this stupid pandemic is people are saying, oh, we can work from home. I didn't know that. But Mark and myself have been preaching that for 25 years. So help us out with this. We're really going to change these people's lives. I've been involved in lots of charities, saving animals and little kids and all kinds of stuff, but I want to change these lives permanently. And once I get the pilot program and prove the concept, I've been taking a grant writing course. And I'm going to roll it out really big and help tons of people. So check it out at imtcva.org/disabilities. And of course, all this and all Mark's great stuff will be in the show notes. And check out the GoFundMe account. And we're using some of the money to hire persons with disabilities to help run the program. And it's something you can really be proud of that you assisted in. So check it out. All right, let's get to the main event. Mark Joyner is an author, inventor, and a serial entrepreneur. He's currently serving as founder and CEO of Simpleology, a web application that helps people and teams get more done faster. And that's what we love, fast. He started as the first, not a first, the first ebook publishing company. I got to find out what year that was. The first online ad tracking company, the second pay-per-click search engine when those, goofballs from Google were still in college. And he invented the tracking pixel, which you've heard me talk about all kinds, and I didn't even realize he had invented it. And he also started a website called StartBlaze that went to number 36 globally within 6 weeks of launching with $0 ad budget. So he is he's just an amazing guy, author of tons of books in 25 languages. Universities use them. Mark, are you ready to screw the commute?
Well, the commute.
Yes, the commute, right? Just because you're in Thailand.
That pause. The great Will Smith says, "If you stay ready, you ain't got to get ready." So I came pre-shaved, and
perfectly.
I'm talking about my cranium. Okay?
That's right. Yeah, I was going to say.
Yes. Yeah. I had to use your little comedic technique and use the pause there. So,
Mark, you're in Thailand right now, which is one of my favorite countries in the world. The people are just so sweet there, and
Yep.
So what are you doing lately? It's been a long time since I talked to you.
Well, man, I've been doing so much, and it's great to talk to you, by the way. You and I do go way, way back, and you're one of the, my favorite folks, in this space. And lately, I've been focusing on, the primary company, Simpleology, but what's really had me excited is a new book that I wrote last year, which is all about futurism and why that's important for entrepreneurs. So I think most of us are not really aware of what's going on in the world. It's not like you can turn on the news and find out what's going on in the world anymore.
Well, sure you can. If you turn on 800 channels and look at 15 layers deep of what's going on, maybe then you can have some type of perspective. But for just the average person,
yeah, even then you're still not sure,
right?
So, this book was all about asking the question, well, what can we know with a relatively high degree of certainty, and once we have that, what are the decisions that we need to make based upon that information? And I would say, in this era of not really knowing for sure what's actually going on, it's an extremely important question to ask, and it's something vital for everybody's survival. So that's had me quite excited over the last couple of years.
Well, and how does it manifest itself? Is it a training course? I mean, it's a book, but I mean, you're always going to take it bigger than that.
That's right. Well, it starts out with a book, and then all of your folks are marketers, so we follow a model where everybody reads the free downloadable book. It's 347 pages, but most people read it in a sitting or two because there's lots of cartoons in it and big type, and it's written to be easy to understand. It's very high level, deep information, right? But it's written so that you can understand this, grok it, as Robert Heinlein said, in Stranger in a Strange Land. So you can, really, really deeply understand it quickly. And then at the end of that, we give people an opportunity to go to a free webinar. And then at the end of that, we tell people, hey, here's a group that we're putting together if you want to join this, so that we can help you, design a business around the techniques that we're talking about in there. Let's all get together and do it. That's the basic business model there.
Now, I know that you didn't really hit it off real well in the formal education system. Is that a fair say or an understatement?
Well, man, you're one of the folks who really knows the real deal about me. I mean, there are things. I mean, I'm not quiet about these things. I tell these things, but most people don't really. You can say things 1,000 times and it doesn't register with people. Yeah, I never really went to school. I would go to school, I would leave. My parents, were never of the mind to force me to go, so I didn't. And I educated myself in libraries, and we didn't have the old inner tubes back then. So when I was around the time where I thought, well, maybe I should go to university, I realized, oh, well, you got to have a high school diploma for that. So I tested out of that, and I scored higher than. They give you a ranking on that, and I scored higher than like 99.9% of the graduating seniors. So I thought, well, that's good. Nothing lost there, since I didn't go to high school. And then I quit university, joined the military, and used independent study. The military has great educational opportunities, and I was able to put, sort of piece together an independent study degree through some of the programs there, and that suited me a lot better because I don't really like classrooms. I would love to be in one of your, I don't know if you still do your butt camps like you used to.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would love to be in an environment like that, but most school environments I have found to be excruciatingly intolerable. So I'm very largely a self-educated guy.
Yeah, and I actually bought the domain name recently, Mark, highly educated idiots.
Outstanding. Excellent. I think I would be at home there.
Well, the thing is I sit here, I work from home, of course, and sit here all day. And let's take the COVID, for instance. I'll be watching TV all day, and 10 highly credentialed doctors will be on during the course of a day.
Yeah.
4 of them say one thing, 4 of them say the exact opposite, and 2 of them say, "Oh, I don't really know." So it's like, what's a person supposed to think?
Yeah, I would trust the "I don't really know" guys.
Yeah, exactly.
The other 8 guys are propagandists.
Right,
I'm pretty
exactly.
Sure.
Yeah. Tell us about the term astroturfing. Explain that to everybody.
Oh man, I love this already. Yeah, you're going into the good stuff. So AstroTurf is something that's actually been going on for a very long time, but it's only become better known in the last few years. In fact, back in the early days, in the early 90s, when you and I were starting to mess around with this stuff, it was happening back then. But basically the idea is this. If I used to work in the intelligence community. That was part of my job in the military, in the US Army. And it's all grouped together under an umbrella called information operations, right? And basically, if you can control the flow of information, you can control what people believe. And if you can control what people believe, you can control their behavior. And astroturfing is a way of owning all of the ways that people can find information. So for example, one of the, I'll be careful to phrase this in a way that's not going to get people's political hackles up too much. I want to speak to all of the humans in the room.
Okay.
So something that we can all agree on probably is that if we're being deceived, we probably have the right to know that, right? And governments, interest groups,
well, see, the right and the ability is 2 different things.
Yes, indeed. Right.
To know that you're being deceived.
Well, this topic here is going to help, grant people part of the ability. This is the beginning of an education that needs to last everybody's whole life. And this is what will enable people to be able to correctly get information now, or at least to know, what to think of the information that they get. So, if you go to Google and you type in a search, you would think, well, okay, Google's going to, do their little magic secret sauce algorithm and sprinkle some truth dust on everything. And the result that I get is going to be right. But that's not the case, because there are people out there deliberately manipulating the results of the search so that if you try to find a particular answer, it will lean in a particular direction. And I'll give an example that goes way back in history that will not kind of were considered to be, hey, maybe okay, right? There was an effort to control the information about the dangers of cigarettes put forth by, shocker, the tobacco industry.
Yeah, right.
Right. And, some of us who are old enough may remember the congressional testimony where they had all of these doctors there.
Nothing wrong with it.
Does cigarettes cause cancer? No, absolutely not. Next doctor, absolutely not. That was an early form of AstroTurf, because they knew that the primary way that people were getting information was, through the news. So now an AstroTurf campaign will control news sources. It will control magazine articles. It will control search results. It will control Wikipedia. And it's exceedingly difficult to find information that disagrees with a particular point of view if the people who benefit from that point of view are putting money into controlling all of these sources of information. And it's exceedingly effective in brainwashing people.
Yeah, and it's I wonder what the derivation of the word is, like blanketing something or what?
Well, it's like from, when you on a football field, they don't use real grass anymore. We use this stuff called AstroTurf, right? So it's like, hey, let's lay down this fake grass on the turf everywhere, right? Let's cover the whole field with this fake grass. And it's kind of a beautiful metaphor because it is largely fake grass that they're laying out.
One of my favorite things is when somebody gets exposed, and I'll use Monsanto as a Roundup, the weed killer. So the guy,
100%.
Yeah, they were saying, "Oh yeah, you could drink this stuff," And so they had the CEO on it. Did you ever see that clip? It's on.
I
YouTube.
Sure did. Yeah. He said, "Well, hey, I've got some right here. Would you like to drink?"
Have a drink.
Well, I'm not an idiot.
Oh, just we are for listening to you. Is that what it is?
That's right, exactly. Well, and that guy, by the way, he's a professional propagandist. He's not only been
That's
a
what
propagandist
CEOs are, right?
Well, he's actually he's been hired by a whole bunch of other people to be a mouthpiece for different forms of advocacy. That's the really funny thing about this. And these people are pretty brazen. Like Monsanto will, I know there are people out there who are probably like, I heard some scientists say that GMOs are perfectly safe, and you're an anti-science zealot if you don't believe that. Well, dig a little bit, buddy.
Who
That's what I
funded
would
the
say.
science? I mean, geez.
That's right. And unfortunately, we have an environment right now where if you do question these things, part of the Astroturfing campaign is convincing the people who believe that the journalism of today is real journalism, that anybody who disagrees is some kind of an anti-science, uneducated, rube that should be shunned from society. Yeah, it's a conspiracy theorist. Yeah, by the way, that term, if you just think about it, is absurd. History is a history of conspiracies. You don't have a war without a conspiracy. So that the fact that phrase is a pejorative should be a pretty red flag to any thinking person.
Well, yeah, but I saw a T-shirt the other day that says I need more conspiracy theories because all the ones I had came true.
That's right. Well, that's the funny thing.
Yeah.
And there's a tremendous amount of truth to that. There's so many things that were anathema to believe 20 years ago that we all kind of know for sure now.
20 minutes ago. I mean, look at the Wuhan thing, that couldn't possibly come. Oh, I heard this one guy is the head of something, the NHS or something, and they manipulate the figures. He said, oh yeah, this one thing is 3 times worse than this other thing. Except one was 0.03 and one was 0.09 out of 1 million people. So he says, it's 3 times worse out of, and still almost nothing. And he, just crazy stuff.
Well, Twain said, there are lies, damned lies, and statistics. And another great quote is, right. Give me an idea and I can find the statistics to support it. Right. And, here's another thing. I was actually going to do a little cartoon about this today. In fact, people say, well, the science says, and that should be an immediate red flag, because if you know anything about science, the science is not some monolithic quorum where all of the scientists get together and go, yep, this is the truth. Let's all agree. No, I mean, you've got different people doing different forms of research, and there's evidence that has different, levels of quality. So the science is rarely, in lockstep agreement. In fact, there's only a few things that that we can have that level of certainty about, like the Newton's laws are probably about the only thing, but we even know contexts now where Newton's laws don't apply, so when people say the science says, it should be shields up, because the propaganda photons are inbound.
Yeah. And you said Newton's laws, that's the physics stuff, but I mean, even the parts of the world, the periodic table, maybe there's 2 or 3 behind it somewhere. I don't know.
Well, check it out. So it's funny you say that. So this is one of the things that I talk about in your roadmap to money in the 2020s. There is a revolution going on. So let me ask you this, Tom. So have you heard of something called graphene?
Yeah, because I can make a bulletproof vest out of it.
Nice. Okay. So you're one out of about 10,000 people that knows what graphene is. Okay. So this is kind of a great segue into the top, what I think is like the grand topic of the day. Right. And so graphene is actually a small slice of a larger phenomenon called the nanomaterial revolution. And it actually is exactly what you're talking about. We know now that behind the periodic table, like you can peel that back and there's another one and another one and another one and another one. So, I mean, so, and just so people know, people who aren't familiar with graphene, it's basically pencil lead, and it's not, lead as such, it's graphite, which is carbon. And if you take carbon down to a single atomic layer, the behavioral properties of that component that we call graphene are totally different from everyday carbon. And it's 100 times the tensile strength of steel, 1/10 the weight. It can be a room temperature superconductor of electricity, which is enormous. And this is going to transform everything. Graphene is starting to, make its way into, commercial devices. And this is something that's changing the very fabric of our existence. And the average person, like really, literally 1 out of 10,000 people even know that this is happening. And the larger phenomenon here is that the information explosion is so intense, is so fast paced, and is so vast that we're experiencing a paradigm shift almost every day now. And these paradigm shifts are occurring and you can't be aware of them because you don't have time to keep up. This is a really, really serious problem.
Well, yeah, I mean, people think, the old stuff was, yeah, you got stuff in your hand that's more powerful than the Apollo, spaceship. But I mean, that's times 10 million now, or a trillion, in just the short time that quote came out.
That's right. That's right. Well, and that the rate at which those things are improving is speeding up as well. And the way I like to kind of dumb all of this down, and I don't want to dumb it. I'm not saying dumb it down because people are dumb.
No, you should, because we're not big thinkers here like you.
Well, I think everybody doesn't have the time to think. I mean, you've got to wake up and do what you got to do to work, whatever your work is, and then you got to take care of your family and do all of these things.
Even if you did nothing all day, you couldn't keep up. If that was your job to keep up, you couldn't.
Absolutely.
Keep up.
So, I'll give you a really interesting something to put this in perspective, right? So two points that I would like to make that should give everybody like a kind of a holy crap moment. And so the first one is, what's a paradigm shift, right? I mean, to give people an example of a paradigm shift and how enormous that is, when we discovered or invented agriculture, that changed the very fabric of our existence. So, people would say that without agriculture, there would be no civilization. And if you think about it, if you look at the Latin root of the word civilization, it comes from civis, the Latin word civis, which means city. So without agriculture, we don't have cities because there's no way for people to settle down and to organize like that. Now think about that. We went from being hunter-gatherers to, forming cities, and those cities turned into what we now know of as civilization. We're experiencing
some of
shifts.
them, not all of them.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Some remain
uncivilized, or they're going back to being uncivilized.
That's right. Yeah, some are degressing, right? And some may be degressing, but under the guise of progress as well.
Right.
But if you think about that, right? We're experiencing paradigm shifts every single day, and we don't even know that they're happening. So, really, really think about that. The world is changing so fast that there are fundamentally life-changing discoveries or inventions happening every single day, and you can't even keep track of how many of these things are happening. And to put this in terms that everybody can understand simply, everything is getting what I call the big five phenomena, right? Faster, smaller, more powerful, more available, and cheaper. Faster, smaller, more powerful, more available, and cheaper. And here's the sort of the crescendo that I want to build up to. So if that's happening in every industry, what makes you think that's not going to happen to weapons technology?
Yeah, there'll be
I just want everybody
3D printing nukes pretty soon.
Well, boom! You see, this is why I love talking with you, Tom. You're so fast, right? I mean, that's in fact one of the big points that I make in the book is like, okay, we have 3D printable automatic weapons now, and by the way, the governments say the way we're going to handle that is outlaw that. Yeah, good luck with that, pal,
right.
Because that worked so well with the outlawing of pirated digital content. And And so, yeah, we have 3D printable automatic weapons. How far will it be before we have 3D printable weapons of mass destruction? I don't think we're that far away. And I think we really need to be seriously thinking about that.
Well, there's some politicians, I would give them coin them with that term right now.
Mm.
Weapons,
yeah, right.
They're weapons of mass destruction. I mean, and
most of them.
See, the problem is some of this, all this stuff that we have to keep up with, people with bad intentions can slide in things when we're not looking, and do a 100%. Lot of bad things.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we have to understand, is that at the end of the day, if we don't deal with the will to cause harm to other people on some fundamental level, I mean, it's only going to take one really unhappy, disgruntled dude or dudette to blow the whole thing up. If you've got 3D printable weapons of mass destruction, it really comes down to that, and that's these are the fundamental questions that we should be thinking about. But the news media has us thinking about all sorts of inconsequential things, most of which are not even true. So we really need to rethink how we're organizing ourselves right now, I would say.
Yeah, and people are afraid. And a quote that you said at some point in your life, or some book, fear is not a good state of mind, but ill preparedness isn't either.
Absolutely. Well, there's this thing called the Stockdale paradox. Admiral Stockdale was a fighter pilot in the Vietnam War. He got shot down. He was a POW, and he made this really interesting paradoxical observation about the behavior of POWs. And what he found was that the guys who were surviving the POW camps had this paradoxical combination of optimism and realism. The guys who were the pure optimists didn't make it. The guys who were the pure realists didn't make it, right? The pure optimists couldn't solve the problems in front of them because they were just like, I'm just going to click my heels and wish I was back in Kansas. And that, of course, does not work. And then the realists who don't have the optimism, they're like, oh, this is horrible. I got to get out of here. And then they would, I got to make a break for it. And then they'd get shot, But the guys who had that combination of optimism and realism tended to be the guys who survived that, just horrific situation that they were all in. And I think that's what we need.
And Stockdale was a general or something?
Well, he ended up becoming an admiral. He started out when he was a POW. He was, I think, a Navy lieutenant. But then, he went on to become an admiral, and he was actually Ross Perot's running mate for president.
Yeah, I always wished Ross Perot, or at least a business person, would have had a chance way back to just see how it goes. And then we had one, and they ran him up, ran him out of there.
Well, it's funny, you'd want to put people who actually know how to run things in charge of running things.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah.
Now we've got these high-level intellectuals who don't really know much of anything.
Highly educated idiots. That's what I said.
Highly educated idiots. We've got a lot of them.
My favorite general quote is Mad Dog Mattis. I think it's be polite and be professional and be ready to kill everybody you meet.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm a pacifist in a way. Like there's an old saying that nobody hates war more than a warrior, and I've seen ugly things, and I would never want to inflict violence on anybody. But at the same time, I'm not operating under the illusion that there are people out there who do not mean well. And, if you're not ready to handle that, life is going to, kick you in the teeth. So you gotta prepare yourself.
Yeah. It's getting worse in many, many cities with the defund the police movement. And again, I told you before we started, I could take any farmer from my little hometown and put him in a city council or something, and they'd make better decisions than these high muckety mucks. I mean, okay, take all the police away, and then see what happens to crime. Oh, it's going to rise. Oh no, it won't. They'll love each other. We'll give them a psychiatrist, and they won't shoot them.
That's right. That's right. I don't think our psychiatry has evolved to that point. Right? Yeah, it would be nice. I mean, it's a lovely notion.
They should get one of those Havana machines. Did you hear about that thing where Well, people are all these people in the government are getting these headaches and disoriented.
Ah, yes.
When I think it's called the Havana Project or something like that. But yeah, that's what we need. Get that. Just get a big riot, hit them with one of those. Everybody, trips and falls, and then we drive on. You don't have to run over.
Well, I've got family, who's pretty high up in, government and military. And, when I was in, McLean, Virginia,
Yeah.
about that city.
Mhm.
I mean, that's
Yeah,
right
I
next to the
lived in DC
CIA.
for 13 years. Yeah.
Okay, right. So what McLean's
Yeah.
all about, right? I mean,
Yeah.
basically, like that's the highest concentration of high level folks,
Right.
in terms of the power structure of the United States. And I talked to some folks who were like, "Yeah, I know somebody who suddenly came down with these headaches," and I mean, that was a real thing. Yeah, it's weird, man. I mean, who knows who or
knows
what?
or who what? And then now all the UFO stuff is coming out now. They say, "Oh yeah, we've known about this for a long time." All these pilots were afraid to talk about it, but that's coming to light. And I think my opinion is awful arrogant to think that we are the only life form, and how pitiful
Yeah.
that is if we are.
Well,
Because
I'm glad you said that. That arrogance is really a recurring theme, isn't it?
yeah,
Because there is this arrogance that we are presented by the people in power, that we're expected to kowtow to and just bow to and believe. And they make so many arrogant statements like, "Hey, this is the fact," or "This is what science says," again, which is a tremendously hubristic statement to make. And most people, well, I don't know, I don't really know that it's most people, but it seems that many people are conditioned to just accept that truth. And it goes back to a powerful psychological principle that's really well supported in the scientific literature, and that's this phenomenon of obedience to authority. We use heuristics, shortcuts to make decisions when we're faced with overwhelming information, and one of the shortcuts we use is just to obey authority figures, because I mean, hey, they're in charge.
They use social engineering like that. All the fraudsters do. They can put a clipboard on and walk into a secure building because everybody thinks they ought to be there. Or they could put a brown uniform on and they must be delivering a package. So
that's right.
It's and it's based in that, and not that that's an authority thing, but it's a symbol of something. That it's called functional fixedness. You think one thing is one thing, and it could be any number of other things.
Well, I'll give you an interesting example of that. I know this, and some of the audience maybe not, but if they don't, this is super good to have in your mental furniture. Stanley Milgram.
This is not IKEA. This is not IKEA where you got to put it together.
This is not IKEA. Yeah, yeah, right. Well, furniture is probably not the best metaphor. It's like it should be in your toolkit, right?
Okay,
you can whip this tool out and use it in any number of ways.
Yes, I love whipping my tool out. Absolutely.
I do too. I must admit. So, Stanley Milgram conducted this experiment where, in scientific experiments, we have, what are called Confederates, right? These are people who are pretending to be something that they're not. And sometimes the test subject doesn't know that he's actually a test subject. He thinks that he's participating as a Confederate in the experience when actually he's the subject.
Right.
And, they put a guy in a room in front of a whole bunch of buttons. It was a control panel. And then in the other room, there was a guy who was strapped up in something that looked akin to an electric chair.
Oh, yeah. And this is...
Yeah, you've heard this one, right?
Yeah, of course.
And it had buttons that go from 1 to 10, and then X, double X, and triple X. And these were administering electric shocks. And then a guy would come in a lab coat, with that, the clipboard and the lab coat, that official looking thing, and he would say, "Hey, I'm going to ask the test subject an experiment, and if he gets the question wrong, I want you to administer an increasing level of electric shocks." And the guy would keep administering electric shocks until it got to a point where it was quite clear that he was about to kill the guy. And the fake doctor in the lab coat with the clipboard would say, "Hey, we take full responsibility, just administer the shock." And I think about something around 60 to 70% of the people would actually administer the clearly fatal electric shock to the person in the other room. just because the authority figure told them that it was okay and that they were taking responsibility. That should make everyone take pause.
Well, I was actually a psych major in college, and I think they kicked me out of the program because I really liked those kinds of experiments. But
Yes.
they didn't let me do them. They didn't let me do them.
That's right. That's right. Well, as marketers now, we get the license to experiment on everyone. So that's
yeah. Right. So you've developed a concept of 9 great threats. Can you give us a couple of them and how they apply to us?
Oh, okay, awesome. So, so Tom has gone through your roadmap to money in the 2020s. So the threats are. So to put it in context, we really need to understand, that the threats as we think of them usually are not, the way most people would think about them, right? When most people think of threats, what we think about is, we think about like, okay, there's going to be war, there's going to be
I gotta go to the gas station.
Yeah, that's right.
You keeping
that's
up
right.
with the U.S. news over there in Thailand?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah. I got to make sure I don't get knocked out by the knockout game.
Right.
Right. That's right. Well, now my biggest threat that I'm afraid of is I've got to turn on the news.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these threats are they're a little bit subtle. Some of them, right? So one of the threats that I think is probably the fundamentally most important to understand is this grand choice that we have between the centralization and decentralization of power. And the framers of the Constitution were very, very prescient in the way that they structured things. And what they seemed to understand was that when you centralize power, it can be a great thing. I mean, imagine if you were to centralize all of the power of the world. One could say, well, hey, that's going to end all world war. Well, that's true, but we've got to understand that democide, that's death by government, has killed more people than all wars by orders of magnitude. If you look at the greatest mass murderers in history, and in order that would be Mao, Stalin, and Hitler, right? Mao and Stalin killed far more than Hitler. Most people are not aware of that. Most of these deaths were not the extermination of the enemy. Most of them were killing their own people. Most of the people that Mao killed were his own people. And if people know about the history of, the Cultural Revolution, that was a pretty ugly, bloody thing. And that was, citizens instigated by the government to go kill other citizens because they demonized other people. And any resemblance to things going on in the world today, I take no responsibility for. So we have to decide, are we going to centralize power? Are we going to decentralize it? And the US Constitution said, hey, we're going to have, different individual states. These were not provinces. These were states. They were actually, considered to be sovereign nations of their own right. And, these individual states should have, if we're going to use the Constitution the way it was intended to be, more or less total control over how they organize themselves. And the federal government should be a loose confederation of these states that gets together only when an existential threat demands it. So, if we're to centralize power completely, this amplifies everything. And, humans make mistakes that will amplify the mistakes that we make. And right now there is a grand push to centralize everything. And that should scare the crap out of everybody, because historically speaking, every time we have had higher and higher degrees of centralization, we have had higher and higher degrees of corruption and destruction. So this is a very fundamentally important choice that we've got to face right now. So that's one of the big 9 threats.
Is that the term monopoly of force? Is that what that applies to?
So exactly. So monopoly of force is part of it, right? So right now, governments have a monopoly of force, and that actually is kind of a nice segue into one of the other threats. It's something that I call the transition tribulation, is what we were talking about before with, the rapid proliferation of high-powered technology. Right now, governments of the world have a monopoly of force because they own the most powerful weapons. They control the largest users, exercisers of force in the world. But what happens when we have a black swan technological event that puts something tremendously destructive in the hands of everybody at a low level? That monopoly of force no longer exists in the hands of government. And that can be good in some sense when we have corrupt governments. This is why the Second Amendment is in place. Most people are not aware that the Second Amendment is there primarily not so you can hunt, but so that you can take down a corrupt government. So removing the monopoly of force is good, but if the monopoly of force enables more destructive forces, in a decentralized way, that can create chaos as well. So these are not easy challenges to solve, right? Our thinking of the past is not going to solve these new threats. But that's where the monopoly of force comes in, and that's the ninth of the 9 threats, by the way.
Yeah. There's I can't wait to read about the rest of them. So we got to take a brief sponsor break. When we come back, we're going to ask Mark to tell us a little bit how military concepts can affect our marketing. Because he's been deep into the military arena. When he says military intelligence, I always kind of snicker a little bit, but the oxymoron thing.
That's right.
But yeah, he's got some very interesting ideas on how military concepts can help us in marketing. Of course, that's what we want to do, so we can screw the commute. So, I just want to remind everybody again about this program I'm so excited about, because the people in it, 3 people so far out of the 5 we're putting through, are just making great progress, and 2 of them are blind. If you want to cry the blues and say, I can't get any success, go watch their update videos at GoFundMe and see what people that are blind are doing with internet stuff. It's just very inspirational. So we have the chance to help these people that kind of got handed dealt a hand that most of us have not had to deal with. And it's just very inspirational, and you can be part of changing their lives forever. And really would love to have your help with this. So visit imtcva.org. Maybe we'll get Mark to gather up, put out a tin cup out in Thailand and grab some bot and throw it over here. That's not BOT, by the way, folks.
Yeah,
and,
that's right.
But anyway, imtcva.org/disabilities, and go over and watch their videos. It'll really inspire you. All right, let's get back to the main event. Mark Joyner's here. He's one of the most, I would say, my idol and everybody's idols on the internet that's got half a brain, because he started a lot of the things that we enjoy and use today. I didn't invent anything. I never had an original thought my whole life. And this guy, I just use this stuff that the guys like Mark invented. In fact, Facebook uses something that Mark invented. Google uses something Mark invented, and he's the real deal. So in this military thing, now you were in a compartmentalized part of the intelligence community, I guess. I don't know if you heard about this. Some guy just and his wife were selling submarine technology to the FBI, and just they won't see the light of day for a while,
That's right.
or ever. But tell us a couple of the military concepts that we can apply to our marketing.
Well, before I even answer that, I want to just kind of applaud you for some of the things here. You're asking such great questions. You're researching. You obviously research your guests, and while you and I know each other, quite well, and you're asking super intelligent questions. And I love that you have this philanthropic angle of the stuff that you're doing. I mean, I think this is how we need to be showing up as people. Most people don't realize that the well-being of everyone is kind of an international security issue at this point, and if we think about this, big 5 phenomena, and about how they can apply to weapons technology, we've really got to take the notion that, hey, people who are really hurting can be a serious threat to everyone. We can't really it's no longer an option to turn a blind eye to people that are suffering anymore. And you seem to get that. So I just want to, give you the hat tip for that.
Thank
really
you.
Beautiful to see it.
And was that a hidden pun there? The blind
which
eye?
One?
The blind eye, because two people are blind in the program.
That was not intentional.
I know.
I might get canceled for that now.
Not by me.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's certainly not by you. So, it's such a great question about these military tactics. I wrote about this in the book Mind Control Marketing years ago. And, most people remember the psychological principles. Most people don't remember the military principles. They're both equally important and interesting as far as I'm concerned. One of the ones that's really interesting that I think is easier to grasp for folks is this thing that came from the art of war. We in English we call him Sun Tzu. In Chinese it's actually Xunza is how you pronounce it. Sonja in Korean is how they say it. The Xunza Bingfa, the Sun Tzu's Art of War, one of the things that he talks about is this notion of types of ground upon which a battle can occur. And one of the types of ground, well, two that are very interesting for marketers are heavy ground and deadly ground. And deadly ground is the absolute worst place upon which a battle can occur. And in fact, this is what most people think of as combat, but in the art of war, it would be considered to be a leadership failure to allow such a battle to occur. And in fact, most people don't know the art of war is really about winning without blood, if you can possibly do it. And, again, nobody deplores war more than a warrior. And, if you're a good, responsible combat commander, you want to be able to subdue the enemy with the least amount of bloodshed. So deadly ground is when two forces meet on a battlefield from which there is no escape. Now, I would ask you, Tom, and ask all of the listeners to consider, who do you think is going to win such a battle? If you've got two forces that meet on a ground and there's no way for them to escape, and the only way to get through this thing is to fight, who do you think is going to win?
Oh, I know the answer. Taliban.
That's right. I love it. Well, you're a guy who studies this stuff too. You understand this, right? The guy that it's going to tend to be the case 99 times out of 100, the person who has the most power, right? That's the most strength, the most skill, the best combination of that is going to win that, right? If you've got equally trained troops and you got 300 on one side and 10 on the other, the 300 are going to win.
Except don't tell that to George Washington.
Yeah, that's right. Well, so that's the thing, right? There are exceptions to this, but one would say, when you if you look at the movie 300, right? Those are soldiers who were probably better trained. They also had greater motivation. They were using terrain in ways that were very advantageous. So they had some strategic advantages, but it only gave them an edge, for so long, right? So, but all things other, everything else being equal, the more powerful force is going to tend to win. This is why in the military, by the way, in the US military, we tend to want to have a 3-to-1 advantage before we even, bite off an engagement. And if we're being smart, we use, different ways to prevent that engagement from occurring in the first place. So deadly ground is highly undesirable. You want to be able to train to fight in deadly ground, but you don't want to fight in deadly ground if you can avoid it at all. So another ground upon which a battle can occur is something called heavy ground. And that's where you go deep into enemy territory and you launch a surprise attack. And of course, that's going to give you an enormous advantage. This is, the special operations guys are really, really good at sneaking in and just like, surprise, you're going to wake up and all of your toys are gone. Yeah, you won't wake up, or you'll wake up to find that all of your toys are gone and that you don't really have a chance and you'd better surrender, right? And to give a nice metaphor about this, imagine, a three-year-old girl tries to fight Arnold, and this is a horrible metaphor, I apologize, but a 3-year-old girl tries to fight Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? And this is I'm going to get really crass and ugly here, but it kind of makes the point clear. Clearly Arnold is not going to have much of a problem with that, but any 3-year-old kid with a gun can sneak up on Arnold Schwarzenegger and take him out. That's the difference between deadly ground and heavy ground. I mean, you don't have to be the bigger foe to win. You've got to, and this is what the art of war is all about. It's figuring out ways to find advantages that are not obvious. Now, and I apologize to everybody for using such crass metaphors, but it makes it unforgettable.
They know
right?
me,
so
they won't even notice.
They won't even notice. Yeah, right. We can go there, right? This is the Dave Chappelle of education. So now we can use that metaphorically. And by the way, I never studied marketing when I first got into business. I was just using, what I'd learned about psychology and about military strategy and tactics metaphorically to formulate these things. And I created a playbook that worked. And it was kind of cool. And so, one of the things that we can think about is this. If you imagine who has more power between a salesman and a consumer, right? Clearly the consumer has more power. He can always just very easily say no, so we have to get an asymmetric advantage. We've got to think like a guerrilla warrior. So if we go right in front of somebody's face and we say, hey, I want to sell you, it's going to be very, very hard to sell because the consumer has more power. So one way that we can apply this metaphorically is if you look at advertorial as a format, and we see hybrids and variations of this in modern marketing now, but advertorial is kind of like a heavy ground attack because people read it and they feel like they're just reading an article, and that article starts to get deep into the territory of their unconscious mind. They've let their guards down before you launch the surprise attack of, hey, here's the offer, right? So advertorial, depending on the context, of course, Eugene Schwartz has lots of counter examples to this, right? But more often than not, an advertorial is going to tend to outperform a lot of direct sales messages, again, depending on context, because you've got the consumer letting their guard down first.
Yeah, I mean, I was taught that in 1996. I took I don't know if you remember, I know you remember Corey Rudel, who died, he died in a tragic racing accident, but he was my first mentor. And he looked at I have this Wake 'em Up professional speaking system. And it was like, I don't know, $1,000, $1,500. And I had this big picture at the top of the page. And he looked he says, Tom, get that picture the heck off the page. He says, you're a smart guy. He says, is it better to show them the benefits and get in their head before you show them an expensive product where they're going to scroll to the bottom of the page and say, oh man, I don't want this for $1,500 and leave? And so I wrote an advertorial under his direction, and I wrote, and I left the regular sales letter with the picture. The advertorial sold 4 times as many $1,000 products as the one with the picture. They didn't even know what they were getting until it showed up on their porch. So
absolutely
very powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. I talked to Corey like 3 days before that happened to him.
Oh my God.
Man. Geez. Yeah. What a great guy he was. Yeah. He made so many great contributions to this field.
So that's military concept to go to the heavy ground, man. And don't stay out of the deadly ground because your chances are a lot slimmer.
That's indeed.
Yeah. Well, gee, Mark, it's been so great catching up with you, man. How do they find all your stuff?
Well, so, I'm the kind of guy who I never like to give more than one call to action. And by the way, that's a really good, and there's so many things I would love to share with everyone.
Yeah, and that's because he knows how to sell stuff in 3 seconds. He's got a book on that too.
That's right.
The irresistible offer. Sell.
I love it.
Excuse me. 3 seconds or less.
Or less. That's right. That's right. Oh, that's a whole other conversation. That's a lot of fun. And that the one thing that I would direct people to do, which I think is probably if you don't check out any of my other stuff, I would just implore everyone to read Your Roadmap to Money in the 2020s, which you can find at yourroadmaptomoney.com, yourroadmaptomoney.com, because that information in there is going to help you know what's going on in the world right now with a level of depth that almost no one has, but desperately needs right now to not only survive as a business, but to survive, I mean, really as a human being. I think the information in there is stuff that if we had an unbroken educational system, this is the kind of stuff that we would be teaching to kids, and it's the kind of stuff that the media would be talking about, but is not talked about at all. And it desperately needs to be understood. And again, it's very easy, even though these are some high level concepts, I make them very easy to understand with metaphors and diagrams and all of that. And it's a breeze to go through. And I would just encourage everyone to really take that seriously. Take the time to sit down and read it, because it will equip you to survive in ways that the rest of the world is not equipping you right now.
Yourroadmaptomoney.com. And what do you mean the educational system's broken? They're teaching martial arts, MMA classes, and having matches at board meetings now at the
That's
schools.
right. That's right. Yeah. Well, we've got trans people teaching 3-year-olds reading them stories now. Not that I have anything against trans folks, but I don't know if we should have them teaching 3-year-olds reading stories to
Well,
them.
the big fight in Loudoun County was that a trans person raped a 9-year-old girl, and then the father gets arrested, and then now the school boards are saying we got to get the Patriot Act after these people, that the school boards, from that one incident. So it's crazy. I'm glad I don't have any. I don't want to say dogs in the fight, right? But I don't have any kids. But
yeah, I don't either.
I'd be afraid to bring a child into the world nowadays. But as long as you're around to figure everything out for us, and because you've been so good at predicting the future, I think you should just start a 900 line.
That's
like
right.
Madam Mark.
So I've heard a funny joke about that. We can end this on.
Yeah.
The Psychic Friends Network.
Yeah.
How come they didn't know they were going to go bankrupt?
Exactly. So, folks, I know this has been a little bit different episode, but you were talking to one of the most respected marketers in the world, and then we also had Mark on too.
Perfect setup.
But really, I wanted you to hear some of the deepness that he's able to go, and it's helped literally thousands of marketers around the world with his teaching. So there's plenty of stuff that'll help you in your business. So go over and grab that yourroadmaptomoney.com. Mark, hey, why don't you come back and we'll talk about irresistible offer one of these days.
I would absolutely love to, man. You're a great guy, and I want to advise all of your listeners: keep listening to this dude. You're listening to one of the only real deals out there. All kidding aside, so keep